KristenKellyTV. Today I'm going to be doing a story time. This is about how my boyfriend Chris was stabbed. Chris is fine, by the way, so yeah, not trying to make this like a clickbait video where I'm like, my boyfriend was stabbed. And people are like, oh my God, is he dead? He is totally fine. So before I get into the story, I just wanted to say that he is doing well. If you do like a story, please give it a thumbs up. If you have any questions, please leave them below. I hope this setup is okay. I hope I'm not too far away from you guys. Let me know if it's okay. All right, also, my face is super red because we're doing extractions at school. We actually have our 300-hour midterm tomorrow, so we have to practice lancing on each other. So yeah, my face is all red and crazy. Just want to explain that first. All right, let's get into it. My boyfriend Chris was stabbed on the side about, I would say, a month ago, maybe a little bit more than a month ago is when this happened. So I was not there when he was stabbed. So I am going to give you the story from my perspective because I wasn't there, so I can't give you the perspective of him. And he also doesn't really like talking on camera. He doesn't really like, I don't know, we're kind of opposite in the way of I'm very like showy and I like to talk about myself and my life, and he's not really like that. So he doesn't really feel comfortable being on camera. So that's why he's not in the video. I'm sorry. Okay, so from my perspective, this is what happened. All right, so let's start from the beginning. Chris was out with his friends. It was around 10 p.m. and I was in bed. I was about to go to sleep because I had school the next morning. So I have a group chat with a bunch of my friends. We were all in school together. And I had even said, I had like a weird feeling about Chris. So he was out with his friends. I knew where he was. Well, I didn't know where he was, but I knew that he was out with his friends. And we do sleep together every single night. So it's not uncommon for us not to touch base throughout the day and throughout the night of what are you doing, how are you, or what time will I see you at home kind of thing. So around 10 o'clock, and I had been doing homework too. So I was done doing my homework and he texted me, and I kind of had like a weird feeling for some reason, I don't know, but he had texted me, can you come get me? So I immediately texted him back, yeah, send me a pin, where are you? And then he didn't answer, so I called him. And as soon as I called him, he was like, hey, and then it went dead. So I already knew that his phone was dead. So I'm in this group chat and I texted my friends and I was like, yeah, I'm a little worried about Chris because he asked me if I would come get him. And then the phone went dead. Do you think that I should go look for him? Because there's one bar in our town that I know that he likes to go to with his friends. So I thought maybe he would be at that bar. And my friends were like, no, like if you're in bed and you don't, I really didn't even know what bar he was at. So they're like, if you don't know where he is and I'm sure he'll just take an Uber, he's gonna be fine. So I, for some weird reason, had like, because it's unusual for Chris to say to me, oh, can you come get me? That's not something he normally does. Like he normally will just show up at home or he will just take an Uber. He doesn't normally, or he'll be like, oh, I'm in the Uber or so-and-so's driving me home. He's not somebody that's like, hey, can you come get me? That's like not really normal for him. So I kind of felt like a weird feeling that was like a little strange. And then the fact that his phone died, so I felt a little weird about his phone dying. So I was like, oh, okay. But still, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go to sleep. My friends were all like, just go to sleep, like not a big deal. And I was like, yeah, I just have like kind of a weird feeling. So I went to sleep, and around midnight, Chris came home and with his friend Brandon, and before I even saw him, he literally opened the door and was like, babe, I got stabbed. Babe, I got stabbed. Everything is fine. Don't freak out. Before you come out here, don't freak out. I got stabbed. Everything is fine. So I'm sleeping like a little angel. I'm in bed and all I hear is, I got stabbed. Don't worry. I was stabbed. Don't worry. So I jump out of bed and his friend Brandon took off his shirt, and Brandon had his shirt pressed up against Chris's stab wounds. So Chris was clearly intoxicated. Brandon was like a little drunk, but really not. So he's holding the shirt up against his wounds, and Chris was like, okay, thanks Brandon for driving me home. Kristen's got it from here. And I was like, what do you mean Kristen's got it? Like, I'm gonna put a Band-Aid over him. So, and I could just tell there was a lot of blood because the shirt was covered in blood. So I'm like, so he took the shirt off, and he was stabbed 3 times, but 2 of them were like pretty bad. Small incisions, I would say, like maybe like a smaller knife. I would say that it wasn't like a really big knife. And so the guy, what happened and what I gathered from information is that Chris was drunk and these other guys were drunk and they were in separate cars. Brandon was driving Chris home to me, who's sleeping like an angel in bed. And they were at a red light. And these guys in this other car were saying something to Chris. And Chris said something to them. And then both of the guys got out of the car. And then they started fighting, like fist fighting. And Chris is 6'6" and like a big guy. And he can like really fight. I mean, Chris can really fight. Like we were at a party the other day and these people were like, oh my God, this one time this guy said something, like he hit Chris's friend and Chris hit the guy one time and like put the guy to sleep. He's like, and this girl was like, I never saw anybody fight like that. So Chris is like a really good fighter. So Chris, I guess, hit the guy and then the guy just stabbed him. Like, if you can't fight, I don't know why you would be in a fight with somebody and then stab them. Like, it's so stupid. So the guy stabbed Chris. So then they get back in the car and Chris didn't even realize he got stabbed. They get in the car and his friend was like, dude, you're bleeding. And he's like, what? Put the shirt on him. And then like a minute later they were here. So Chris is like, yeah, Brandon, you can go. And I'm like, so I take away the shirt. Clearly blood was coming out so fast. So I was like, okay, we have to go. But I'm, at the same time, I'm like, and Chris was like, babe, everything is okay. And later on, he told me he didn't even remember any of this because like the adrenaline, and he was like, so like just, in like kind of not panic mode, but he was so like, I don't know if it was from the alcohol or if it was just from the adrenaline or what, but he like didn't even remember any of this. And he was like, babe, everything was good. So I'm like looking at it and he's like trying to make sure I'm not crying. I'm like, no, I'm fine. I'm just like, we have to go to the hospital. And Chris was like, no, we don't have to go. And I'm like, no, we need to go to the hospital. So we're in the car, and as we're in the car, they're like listening to music and they're both like singing and they're both like blah, 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 like, and I'm in the back and I'm holding Chris's hand and Chris keeps telling me how much he loves me. He's like, I love you so much. Like they're both in the front, I'm in the back seat with like my hands on Chris, and Chris is like, I love you so much. He's like, you're my soulmate and you're my best friend and I can't wait for us to get married and have kids and have this beautiful home with all these big dogs, and we're gonna have this and that, and he's like going on and he's like talking so much about how much he loved me that I started thinking like, oh my God, is he in a lot of pain, but he's acting like he's not in a lot of pain to not scare me, because he's talking so much about how much he loves me and how much I mean to him and how much our lives are like so perfect and how much, we're soulmates and he can't believe that we found each other, and how much he just loves me with all of his soul and being, and like, so he's going on and I'm like, yeah, babe, yeah. And in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, is he gonna die? Because the way that he was like just confessing all of his love for me and like how much he just adored me, and like, I'm like, oh my God, is he gonna die? But I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, okay, like everything's fine. There's actually a YouTube story that this girl filmed and her boyfriend died. Her boyfriend almost the same thing happened. Her boyfriend got into a fight on like some stupid fights with a guy in another car, and her boyfriend got stabbed and died. And I kept thinking about that YouTube story. I'm like, oh my God, please do not. Dude, it is such a crazy story. And in that story, the girl did not know her boyfriend died until later. Like the police came and talked to her and she was like at the hospital. She didn't even know he died. And they're like, oh yeah, he's dead. So I'm like, oh my God. Like, so at this point, I'm like kind of panicking, but I'm like, at the same time, I'm like, okay, it's not that bad. So then we get to the hospital, and first of all, we went through the wrong door. We like went into like a different, it was like the ear, like it was like a different thing. It wasn't even the emergency room. And they had this like big show. They're like, you know, the guys are coming in, they're like, oh, and people are like, this isn't the emergency room. So we go back over and we go to another emergency room. Chris is bleeding. His friend has his shirt still on him, so his friend is like covered in blood. I'm covered in blood. We come in first, and I'm like, my boyfriend got stabbed, and these people, I mean, I'm sure that they are so used to like crazy stuff coming in the ER. So they're like, okay, yeah, can you go over there to like fill out the information? And Chris is just bleeding everywhere. So they're like, wait, is he bleeding right now? And I'm like, he got stabbed. Like, what do you mean is he bleeding? So there's blood coming everywhere, and for some reason there was like $40 on the ground. Like there was 220s just laying on the ground. And Brandon, Chris's friend, was like, there's $40 on the ground. Like, like in the middle of this weirdness, like, you know, of like us trying to get him in the hospital, and like Brandon's like, there's $40 on the ground, and Chris is like, there's $40 on the ground. And the like emergency people are like, yeah, we know. And Brandon's like, well, are you not gonna pick it up? And the guy was like, yeah, it's fine, don't worry about it. And Brandon goes, okay. So Brandon picks up the $40 and puts it in his pocket. Like, and the people are like, no, that's her $40. And he's like, well, you should have picked it up off the ground. And he's almost like fighting with these people. And I'm like, give her back the $40. Like, what the hell are we talking about right now? I was like, I'll give you $40 if you shut up. Like, Chris is bleeding everywhere. Like, it was just so random. So, and so he gives her back the $40, which is now like covered in blood. I'm like, what is going on with these two? These two are like a comedy show. So and there was security for some reason at this emergency room, and the security were wearing suits. I have never, I mean, because this was in Boston, and every other emergency room I guess I've been to has been like in small towns. I don't know. It was so weird. I've never seen security. Like, it was almost like they were security for a nightclub, but they were at a hospital in the emergency room. So the security comes over now because like Brandon had picked up her $40, and like, and Chris is like, well, she should have picked up that $40. I'm like, what is going on right now? So somebody rushes over with a wheelchair, and they put Chris in it, and then they start running with him. So Brandon and I are running behind them because we think we're coming. And then the security's like, no, you can't go with them. And we're like, okay, well, you could have just said that, like, you know what I mean? Like, so they're like, we need to figure out what happened. And then in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, are they gonna think that like one of us stabbed him, you know? So they take him, and then Brandon and I go sit down, and then the lady comes over, and she's like getting information from me, like, you know, about Chris's insurance, and like just all this information, making sure his stuff is right. And then she's like, oh, and how are you related? And I was like, oh, it's my boyfriend. And she goes, oh. Kind of like I wasn't his wife or fiance. So it was just, I don't like the way that she said it. She was like, oh, you know, and that kind of bothered me. And even later I was like, Chris, we need to get married, because like, I don't ever want anybody to question me like that before. Like, again, like it like really like kind of rubbed me the wrong way. She's like, oh. Note that there are people that are in relationships for years and people don't care. I think also like I really want to get married to Chris, so I'm just like using this excuse. I'm like, hi, hint. So we're sitting there, and there's like a homeless guy that's on this bench, clearly intoxicated, and he's like so, like, his odor was so pungent, we could smell it from where we were. And then the security goes over to him, and they're like, oh, you need to check in. And he's like, I'm not gonna check in. And he's like, I already checked in. And then he fell asleep. And then security is like nudging him to move. The guy gets up, and he starts like trying to box the security, but the security is so far away from him. Like, security's like this far away from him, and the guy's like throwing like these very weird punches. Like he was like imagining like punching people. I don't know. So that happens. And then Brandon is like, leave him alone, about the homeless guy. Brandon's like, he's not doing anything, leave him alone. And I'm like, Brandon, can you not right now? Like, I was in bed sleeping. I get woken up to Chris being stabbed. Now you're like picking up money off the ground, starting issues. You're starting like issues with this homeless guy. Like, can we just please just like sit here calmly, and you know? So he's like, leave the homeless guy alone. I'm like, oh my God. Then this guy comes in and I see him. I saw this whole thing. This guy comes in and he was like so weird looking. He reminded me of, oh my God. Oh, like kind of like Pee Wee Herman. I would like imagine like a creepy version of Pee Wee Herman. Like this guy really looked like a pedophile. He like was super like clean cut looking, like in a very American Psycho way. And he had with him a travel bag I'm like treats. Like, you know, when you go somewhere, like maybe you'd go to the beach or something, you might bring with you like, it's almost like one of those like a cooler bag, that's what it was. So this guy had like a cooler bag with him and he like comes over all like, he just like walks in, sits down, puts his cooler bag down, takes out a book and starts reading. And he's just sitting like super quietly, very still, reading, not talking to anyone. And there was no one in this, like, you know, sometimes emergency rooms are really packed. It was not packed at all. So there was no line, there was no one else. It was just Brandon and I sitting there. And then, hi, I'm doing a story time. Do you want to be in it? You want to show your scars from being stabbed?
Nope.
It's about being stabbed. You want to show your scars?
Nope.
Show your scars. Why? What? Fine, you don't have to show your scars. Hola! Sorry, so Chris came home. So Chris is actually like over here, but he doesn't want to be on film. So if you hear anything, that is him. This is also so weird. It's so weird because he's like listening to me tell a story about him. I just feel weird. Okay. So, so the guy, he sits down, he's reading his book, and he's just like meticulously going through every single page and turning it and turning it. And he's reading and turning it. No one says anything to him. So then the security guard and he opened his bag and he took out some nuts and then ate the nuts, like one nut, two nuts, like ate them super slowly. And I'm watching him, like I'm just watching this guy like he's Norman Bates. He actually reminded me of Norman Bates, like the original Norman Bates. Like he really did remind me of him. So he's eating his nuts. And then he zips up the bag and puts them back. The security comes over and says to him, like, sir, did you check in? And he's like, no, I haven't yet. And he's like, okay, well, you can check in right there. There is no line. There is no one waiting to check in at this point. So he says, okay. So he goes over, he checks in, and then once you like give them your information, they put you into this other little room. And I can see both this station and the other little room. So the guy goes from that little station into the other room and then says something to them on the lines of this, he has to use the restroom. So then he goes into the restroom. So all of these things are very close, so I can see where everything is. The guy goes into the restroom. I actually forgot that he went into the restroom because there had been such a long span of time that Brandon and I are sitting here by ourselves and that the guy is in the bathroom. Then one of the nurses goes over, says something to the security guard, and then she goes over to the bathroom and kind of knocks on the door and just like says something about how they have to finish doing the intake. And I kind of like look over and I'm like, is that still that guy? The guy is still in the bathroom? Because such a long span of time had gone by. So then the nurse goes back into the little room, which is see-through, it's clear. And it's just like a big window. And the guy finally comes out of the bathroom. He is wearing a different shirt, different pants, completely different outfit. Still has his like crazy little bag. And goes back into the room. And the nurse, you could even tell that the nurse was kind of like, you know, what is going on with this guy? So she said to him something about the bag. I'm sure she said something like, oh, can I look in the bag? I mean, these people have probably dealt with so many crazies, you know? So he opened the bag in front of her and she looked in the bag and kind of was like, and then shut the bag and then she took him away. So we're sitting there, all of this like craziness is happening. And then the lady comes over and she says, oh, you can go back. Now to me, I was thinking that it was a dire circumstance, that if Chris was not you know, like sutured up at that moment, he was gonna bleed out because he was bleeding so much in my mind. So we go back and he is just like laying there in the bed, like he's all, you know, like attached to all these wires, but he was still bleeding. Not only was he bleeding, they had him like laying on like a weeby pad pretty much for like a dog, was still bleeding, and nobody had like sewn him up, because I guess what they had to do was they had to x-ray him, and they had to like make sure that there was no internal organs that had been punctured by the knife. So, but they hadn't even done that. They gave him some liquid, and the liquid, you know, like shows your internal organs, but they didn't give him any painkillers. They didn't sew him up. They hadn't even done that like CAT scan or whatever it is at that point to check his organs. So he was pretty much just laying in a bed bleeding out while we're in the waiting room, you know, watching all these shenanigans happen. So we come in and we're like, really? Like nothing has happened? He's like, no, like he's just been laying there. So, and by the way, like he was in like the best mood. So he's like smiling and laughing. His friend is smiling and laughing. They're just like talking about how funny this is. To me, like them being so upbeat about the situation, like made me more comfortable and me more upbeat about it. But I was kind of pissed off at like the whole, like I couldn't believe that there was like nothing happening. Like he wasn't getting sewn up. He wasn't like, to me, it seemed like there really was not a lot going on in the ER that night, and that he wasn't like a priority. Like I felt like we weren't a priority because he wasn't even being, you know, like sewed up, which I thought really was the main reason we were there, because I thought he's still bleeding. Like the blood was still coming out this whole time. So finally, they wheeled him off, and they did, you know, the x-ray or CAT scan or whatever it is to make sure that his organs were fine. His organs were fine, thank God. He was not punctured at all. So, I'm trying to think what else happened. So we were waiting. We were just like waiting and waiting and waiting. I think we probably waited for, I would say, 2 hours before they came in finally to stitch him up. So when they came in to stitch him up, the girl that did it was very nice and she did a great job, but she was not even a doctor. What was she? She was she was like a Harvard medical student. So she was not even a doctor. She was just like this girl. So she did his sutures, and I guess this was like the best job she ever did, because about 8 different people came in and remarked about what a good job she had done. So she did him up, we left, and he was fine. We never went to the police, and we never, I guess, like really found out who had done it, which I guess didn't really matter because Chris is fine. But yeah, he was good, which is like, thank God. And yeah, it just, you know, shows you, don't get into stupid fights. You might get stabbed. All right, I hope you guys like this video. I will talk to you soon. Bye.